Alright, so just a little introduction for anyone who wanders onto this video and is asking themselves, what the heck am I looking at? A person on Discord asked me if there were any tutorials for this really obscure game source developed with Shockwave. Uh, Shockwave isn't really a technology you hear about anymore, and I won't really get into that a whole lot in this video, but notably it was actually one of the uh, considered once the king of interactive web content before the rise of Flash Player and more recently HTML5. This particular game used Adobe Director, previously Macromedia Director, to target Shockwave as a standalone application for desktops. So the individual who asked about the tutorials was specifically looking into how to add new monsters to the game when editing the source code. So I thought I would help him out a little bit by making this video and showing you exactly how to do it. Um, if I'll just I will say that I've never actually done this before, um, adding monsters to the FSO1 source. It's not something that I've actually had to do. I have worked with many other parts of the source back in many years ago, previously, when during a time that FSO, Shockwave, and Director here was a little more popular. Um, if you're watching this video to also learn how to add monsters to the game, you should be pretty familiar with Director or any of its predecessors. As you can see, I'm working with Adobe Director 12 trial version. I don't think you can even get Adobe Director from Adobe anymore. They stopped supporting it a couple years ago, I think. I happen to have a trial installation laying around on one of my hard drives, and an old FSO source that uh, works relatively smoothly. Um, Thanks to Murdoch for that. Um, if you're not using Adobe Director 12, then you should still be pretty familiar with what I'm about to do. It should come pretty easy. Now, the person that asked about the tutorial um, was really confused about the monster system. He had been able to, admittedly, um, add items and other things to the game that were a little more straightforward. But he told me he just couldn't, the really vexing thing he just couldn't understand was how the monsters were linked in the source to the monster frames located in the CARES library of the CAS library, the CARES section of the CAS library. Uh, and it was a little confusing, and the real kicker was how it was identified, because if you go into, if I can find it here, I think it's characters, you see, head, head 1, deaf body, head 10, all the paper doll, you would call it, for the characters are all named for the proper frames, um, and are associated as such. And he said he was able to add items to the game just fine, but he just couldn't grasp adding monsters to the game. And so I took a look at it, and I realized, because it's really confusing. It doesn't work the same. It's definitely not what I would have done. There's a lot of, I guess, flawed reasoning behind the system in general, but it does work. Definitely, like I said, definitely not how I would have done such a system, but it does work. And go back to cares here. It does work, but it is a little confusing. And the confusing part comes from the identifier here. In the case of the item frames that were identified, the all the monsters you see, there's a number that identifies them, and then if you search for that number in the source and you don't find it, and you wonder where does that number come from, how do you get that number to be, for example, I think he specifically said orcs were number 31. How does orc equal 31? If I can find it here we go. How does orc equal 31? And we'll get into that in a second. So the identifier of each frame is broken up into three different sections. You've got three different items, rather, broken up by a delimiter, which is a dash in this case for all the mobs. 31 is, of course, as we've gone over, is the identifier, and then F1 is frame 1, and then E is it's facing east. So, it's Monster 31 frame 1 facing east, Monster 31 frame 2 facing east, Monster 31 frame 3 facing east, so on. But how do we get that? And I did some poking around, and I think I figured it out. Like I said, I've never actually done, this is the first time I'm actually going to add a new monster to the game, and I'm going to do it for the first time with you guys right now. And I'm pretty sure I understand how it works after poking around at the source in the code. And I don't have any sprites, any unique sprites, so we're just going to borrow some from some of those that are already existing, and I'll make a couple changes so you can see that it's actually the one that we added, and there's no gimmicks or anything. It works. I'm pretty sure this is going to be pretty simple. And I've scrolled down to the bottom of the cast library down here, where we've got some open members to work with, and I'm going to start by just copying some of. I guess I'm going to use the Griffin here, and we're just gonna. Oops. I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of these. And all I did there was I clicked on the first one, I held shift, and then I clicked on the last one, standard. Highlight them all, copy cast members. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to actually start right here and paste them, and then we have all the cast members. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to change this very first value here is the identifier number, and so the number obviously is going to have to be unique. It could actually be anything you want it to be. It could be a word. It could be you could go back to naming them if you want to. It really doesn't matter. So we're going to go ahead. Yeah, the system doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But we're going to go back to without rewriting large swaths of the source code. You have to do it this way. It obviously isn't the most elegant solution. I think the original developer was I think he was just kind of learning during this whole process. I mean, it's pretty remarkable for someone at that skill level to actually build something that is pretty much this complex, especially considering that the method of development in Adobe Director and everything involved is so quirky. The timeline, and it's just you look at it today in today's standards of object-oriented programming, and it's a very bizarre methodology of programming and software development. But and not just beyond that is the techniques used by the actual developer are very I would say unorthodox, I guess. But I guess before I get too far off on that tangent, we'll go ahead and start editing the value here, and I'm just gonna rename it to the leet spelling of test 7357. So our identifier for our new monster that we're going to add is going to be 7357, and we're also going to name it test later on. So, oops, that was an accident, but that's okay. Going to go ahead and just do all these really quick, and then we will I'll add a little something to each frame so we know that it's not the old Griffin anymore. Okay. And there we have it. We've changed all of them. Now we're going to go back in, and I am just going to edit the very first frame of, I'm sorry, not the very first frame, but the standing frame of each of these. And I'm going to make it say test in all caps. And so, which is going to be the second frame here, just to show. I wanted to do a little animation just to show that it's working properly. Oh, and there we have it. Okay, so we've got our new NPC. We borrowed the Griffin. And that's all we need to do in our cares library. Let's go over to monsters. Okay, now here's where it gets really confusing. So these are basically the, how should I explain? These are basically all of the values for each one of the monsters that are in the game. And if you look at it, all you see is a bunch of gibberish. Now, the person that did this, they kind of knew what they were doing, but they didn't really know what they were doing. Each one of these values is a each one of these values represents something, but basically all that's been filled in for each value is gibberish. I don't know. I have no idea why this was done. It was totally unnecessary. Yeah, it's a little baffling, but as you can see, there's a cast member on the very end here called generic that shows you what each of those actually represent. And the first one is the body. And so that is what represents the that is basically that's what represents the number for each of the monsters in the, I'm sorry, let me go back to it. That's the number that represents the identifier in each of the monsters' names for each frame. Is that number right there, is the body. And of course, the second number is hit points, defense, attack, blah, blah, blah. So that's the number we're going to be looking at in each one of these. we can go back to it here. Now, okay, so we figured out that each one of these is a file that represents the data for each, not a file, each one of these represents the data for each monster, each of these cast members. And so then obviously the second question is, well, how do we link how does it link to all this gibberish? How does each monster link to each one of these cast members then? And that's the even more confusing part. And the answer is this list right here. So in Adobe Director, you can make basically a visual array. And so all this is an array of elements, of string elements. This is an array of strings with all the monsters in it. It's located in the monsters library. And it's in order. So basically what happens is when the map loads, and I've got the script here, where is it? Okay, so the map loads, and if mob comes in, void, if, okay, blah, blah, blah. Set mlist equal field mlist of cast monsters. Okay, so basically it's basically turning this list into an array that it can loop through. Repeat with x to 1. It's gonna loop from 1 from the first line all the way down to the 130th line. And if mob name equals line x of mlist, then set which member equals x. Okay, so this says that if the mob name in whatever line that it checks of mlist, the array we talked about, then set which member equals x, which will be the line number. So basically it's looking for the line number with the same mob name. It's looking for the line number of the same mob name that's in your map data file. So basically it's saying, okay, if you have a map data file you have a map data file of a map that has a slime on it, that map number, or that map list number, x is going to be 1 if it's a slime, x is going to be 2 if it's an orc, x is going to be 3 if it's a wolf, etc., etc., etc. And each one of these correlates with a different cast member. So number 1 is a slime. Well, that means that number 1 in cast lib monsters, see, we get it set mobber equals field member which member was x. We found x by finding which line contains the name of the monster. Sorry if this has been confusing. It's hard to explain what this person did, but like I said, it works. Line x, mob name is line x. And then if which member isn't void, meaning empty, which will happen if it doesn't find anything, set mobber equals field which member of cast lib monsters. So basically set mobber to which member cast lib monster. So Anyways, so oh, it's so confusing. But it really is simple. So each one of these is a number on the cast member. So number 31, or number 2 rather, has a body value of 31. That's an orc. So we go back to our list. Is orc number 2 on the list? Orc is number 2 on the list. It's the second on the list. It's also the second cast member. That's how it links orc to the second cast member of monsters, to the body 31, all the way to cares 31. 30 for slime. Slime's number 1 on the list. Slime's 30 for the body identifier. Yep, 30. So I didn't do the greatest job of explaining all that. It's hard to wrap your head around. I mean, it's actually in practice really simple. It's unnecessary. But it's actually quite simple. So all we have to do is we're going to make a new one. And so we'll basically have to go to the end of the list. And we're going to name our new monster test. And then, of course, we'll have to put it in the cast member slot that correlates with its number on the list. And there's no way of telling that there's no way of telling which number each of these are, because it's not listed. So you basically have to count. And the last one that I know of is Acrostia, which is 81. And I can't just assume that 111 is the next one on the list. I can't just assume that number 111 is the last one on the list, so we have to go back to the list and count from the last NPC that's listed here that I know of. 108. 108 is what? Mizelle. I don't see that on here. What? Mizella? Oh, there it is. Okay. 107, it says Mizella 2. So it's like, what the heck is, what, there's all 101, what? It doesn't make any sense because they're not actually named or anything. So we'll go back to the one that is named because it's an NPC and not a monster. And that's Acrostia, and that's 81. We're going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. Okay, so fair enough. It actually was 111. So we're going to go ahead and copy it. And we're going to paste it there just to make it quick and easy. And all these values are just gibberish. You don't need to worry about them. You can name your monster whatever the heck you want. It can be test. You can name your monster what you want it to be. I don't understand why this person, did whatever they did here. And then we're just going to change that first value, which is supposed to be body. we're going to change it to 7357 because that's what we made our Griffin, our test Griffin. And that's it. That's really it. Your monster is now added. That's it. So now if we want to test it, let me go in. If you'd like to test it, you can go into your, let's see, this is the servers folder. And we're going to go into, I guess, NPC. And we're just going to copy, we're going to open that first one there. We're basically just going to copy it. Just hold in there a second. We're just going to copy it. File save as. Let's see. Sorry, we're going to open up a one of the monsters. The first one here is Cyclops, so we're going to open that up. And we're just going to file save. Save as test. Then we're going to go back into, let's go back to data, mobs. Okay, so this is the list of your mob map data. And let's see, this is our starting map. So I'm going to open up the starting map. And then all we're going to do is change name from slime to test, which is the mob we just created. We're going to save that. And now we test. And hopefully everything goes right and it shows us some griffins on the map. So let's go to our score. Let's go to the stage. Let's press play. Load up the loading page there. Let's log in. King FSO. Oh no, you know my password. Let's see. Let's make sure the server's running. Restart the server after we've made those changes. Just a second. Booting up the server. Server's booted. Press OK. Hey, would you look at that? And that's pretty much it. I mean, um, that's it. Let's see. You'll notice probably if we go into World Editor that it doesn't, it's got it there, but it probably isn't in the list. So basically what you'll have to go in and do is find the script where it populates the list and just make sure it adds that iteration of the, you know, the extra mobs that you add to add it in there. But it's definitely in there, and you can certainly interact with it, and so you can get rid of it and whatnot, and it's certainly there. If we go back into return to game there it is. I mean, it's there. Let's add a let's go ahead back into the world editor there. Let's add an actual griffin so you see that there's actually, you know, it's not, I didn't just modify the griffin. There's the actual griffin. And we're going to save the map. Save. And go back. Return to game. So we've got our griffin, and then we've got our test, and that's monster test. Monster griffin, monster griffin, monster test. And king. Okay. All right. I hope that helped some of you. I hope I didn't just confuse you even more. I know the end of that wasn't very articulate, as I got kind of caught up in I got caught up in the I guess the, I don't know what you just call this. It's crazy how it was done. It just, my brain explodes when I try to work with some of the things on the source here that just don't make sense. It drives me nuts. But you know, more power to the developer. He did his best, I guess, and he certainly did a lot better on FSO2 and 3 and Stratix and beyond. But I guess that's the end of this video. If you've got any comments or questions, if you need to, if you can't figure out how to add the monster to the list in the NPC, not the NPC, but the map editor, and it should be in the NPC editor too. But if you have any more troubles or issues, just let me know, and I'll see if I can help you out. If there's any other videos that you'd like me to make, feel free to, recommend any new ideas or tutorials that you'd like to see. And if this video helped you out, subscribe or like or drop us a donation in the link below. Thanks for watching.